G'day everyone, Pete Techman Coman here for another exciting episode of the Tech Effect. And today we have another very, very special guest. But to help me introduce our special guest for today, please welcome to the show my co-host, my partner in crime, Mr. Mark, the Bearded Tech Skian.
Hey Pete, how are you, mate?
I'm
Thank
really
you for
well.
that,
Yourself?
Warm introduction. Yeah, I'm going very, very, very well, actually.
It's very early in the morning once again for you
look,
over there.
The
And
things
it's
I
the
do
weekend.
for you.
This is how committed you are.
Oh, I'm committed. Yeah, it's a Saturday. Like I don't get out of bed on a Saturday before 8 o'clock for anybody except for you. Yeah.
I feel honoured.
Yeah. How's things over in NYC, Pete?
Mate, things are heating up, temperature-wise and business-wise. The humidity and Celsius or Fahrenheit, as they measure it over here, is going through the roof. High 30s, very, very high humidity. So trying to spend as much time in the pool as possible. Business-wise, things are really starting to pick up, which is really good. The city's starting to get that energy back, which is great.
Yeah, excellent. That's great to see. Good to see. It's a little bit happening over here. It's in southeast Queensland. Well, we're in the middle of actually
lockdown.
Yeah, well, we specifically are out as of last night at 6 p.m. But certainly Brisbane's still in a lockdown, and Sydney's in a world of pain, and I think Northern Territory's in a world of pain, and WA's in a world of pain. So yeah, it's hopefully it doesn't last too long. But
yes,
but
fingers crossed.
I'm pretty excited today. I must say, this is today.
Why are you
we've got
excited?
I haven't been this excited since Easter. Sorry, I'm here all day, folks.
Jokes.
So we got a very special guest, and this guy has what a whole string of acumen behind his name. Director of USC Learning Environments, chair of HETMA. He's the editor, owner, director, dude of Higher Ed AV podcast, keynote speaker. He's a crypto investor. We might get into that a bit later. He's had appearances on ABC, Fox, just about every TV network in the globe. Like, this guy has been everywhere and very well known in the industry. And we are crossing to the other side of the United States of America. How's that for a bad accent?
That's terrible. That's terrible.
I won't try that again. Joe Way, mate, thank you so much for coming on the show. We are very happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I'm sorry, but I should have threw it in here when you did your egg site. Hold on. There you go. You got a rim shot for you. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me on. This is great. I know I'm kind of between the two of y'all, right? See, I'm going to throw some y'alls in there for you.
Yeah,
I'm going to give you the entire experience because we are in our 4th of July. Of course, our Independence Day. I don't know why we call it 4th of July, because the entire world celebrates 4th of July, if you think about it. Right. We just only make something special of it, but you all have it. Everyone has a 4th of July.
Yeah. Yes. I celebrate 4th of July because it's my brother-in-law's birthday, but that's about it.
But you do get props. Not only do you get up on a Saturday morning early, and you've got a button-down shirt. I mean, like, it's not even like...
Yeah, look, we just don't zoom the camera, tilt the camera down, Joe. That's all.
Let's not.
No, let's not. Joe, first of all, I just want to give some perspective to those people in Australia. You're very well known in the AV industry in the US, but in Australia, for those who may not be familiar with it, you're currently the director for learning environments at the University of Southern California. And I'm just really excited to hear more about your role there, what you actually do. So can you tell us a bit about what that is and some of the major projects that you've got a major project you've recently deployed. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this. So yeah, my day job is that I am the director of learning environments at the University of Southern California, like you said, which really means that I oversee the design, installation, and support teams for about 500 total general use spaces that makes up classrooms, conference rooms, computer labs, group study rooms, probably auditorium, I don't know what I said, anything. If it's got technology there, it's us. So I'm really account for about 70% of the campus because it's all of our general use for most of the classrooms and all that, some specialty schools. So, and I oversee all of the teams for that, which is great because this means I sit at a desk and they do the work. Wonderful setup. Great way it works. But yeah, no, we just rolled out a very, very impressive, fully holistic AV over IP solution. We're honored to have just been awarded Commercial Integrators Case Study of the Year for basically the entire AV industry for this.
Wow.
There's some videos around. You're welcome to take a look at it. Crestron just did a great case study on it too. But it is a fully developed, so everywhere that there is a cloud, software, server, IP-based solution, we put it in there really to kind of streamline our technology. Look where we could go. We could move the technologies away from legacy systems into the direction the rest of the world was going. Ironically planned even pre-pandemic, bringing in UC technologies. I've made the claim that, you know, the real convergence that we're seeing in our industry is not really the convergence of IT and AV, but UC and AV. And that has been coming for years. So we could say that almost every one of our spaces is a fully integrated, you know, Zoom room with full wireless sharing, cloud service support. We are currently Crestron's largest VC4 deployment in the world, somewhere around 3,000 Dante endpoints through Dante Domain Manager. So it is quite an impressive
Huge
setup. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's really unique about that, or interesting, is that so when I was back in Australia, we used to do a lot of work for universities around the country. And one university in particular we did a lot of work at was called USC, University of the Sunshine Coast. And they, ironically, when I say just, probably 18 months ago, just completed their one of their new buildings at a new campus. And they went all Crestron NVX and Dante. They went totally AV over IP, which a lot of universities in Australia were going that way. You know, we've done some work with them, with other universities who had deployed AV over IP solution or a Crestron AV over IP solution. So it's just it's ironic that, you know, you're at USC in Australia has deployed what sounds like a very, very similar or deployed a very similar rollout.
Yeah, it must be in the letters. USC means something special is happening. You know, but you know, kind of even talking about that, it's one of those things where I think that the AV industry has a huge opportunity, and COVID showed this. We had a huge opportunity to really show what our purpose is, right? And that really is more than just a bunch of little boxes inside of a lectern or, you know, back in an IDF, but an opportunity to really facilitate communication among people. COVID showed that, right? When we had to move 100%. Everything off, and now taking that, and that was really the mentality we wanted to use at USC, is to think of the, you know, how could we connect people using our technologies and facilitate really a very user-centric focus. And this is, all of our systems were honestly designed by our faculty. It wasn't me saying, I wanted to challenge us as part of our digital transformation to rethink how we serve our customers and then let the technology figure itself out. How could we work in an ecosystem that worked for them? And what's really special about what we did is not necessarily, again, the boxes that connect the content, but thinking of it as, what does a faculty member do when they come to a space? What does a student need when they're taking a class? And that was where we thought, you know, if they can walk in from the second they swipe their card to open the door, can the room be smarter than them? Can it know who they are? Can it start their Zoom class for them? Open up Blackboard, connect the students, already know exactly how they want to teach, whether they want to wirelessly share or they're going to connect. All of these other aspects, can we utilize that and in order to create a true learning environment, and then obviously optimize that for accessibility, safety, sustainability for the students as well?
What I found interesting, a couple of months ago, I spoke to one of the AV support staff at USC, and she was telling me how the different faculties at the university actually have the ability to choose their own equipment, right? So I was asking about support and so on, and she said, well, you know, faculty A may choose one system and faculty B may choose another. There didn't seem to be there was somewhat of a standardization, but it sounds like there is a fragmented sort of rollout of technology there. Is that correct? And if so, how does that affect, you know, how do you have that seamless user experience? So when a student goes from one faculty to another, or a teacher goes from one room to another, that it looks and feels the same if the faculties are doing their own thing?
Yeah, you know, this is a great question, because it's the line of, where is the line between individuality and need, you know, and personal need and standardization, right? That's really the question, right?
Yeah.
Is how much do we want to tailor their experience, and how much do we want to let them tailor their own experience? And this is where we thought, what are they comfortable with? What are people comfortable with? They're comfortable with their own laptop. They're comfortable with their own cell phone, right? These are the things that they know how to do. And we all even learned during the pandemic. Everyone now knows how to go home and go on a Zoom call. And they even teach a class that way, right? Because they've had to learn that. So could we replicate their comfort when they come to the space? Because the fact is, they don't care what technology's in the lectern. They just want to know, does the room work? And can my workflow work with it? And that was how we were able to have a quasi standard. Everything behind the scenes worked. So we simplified our our UX, our touch panels are very simplified. They're, and this is again, utilizing a CH5 or HTML5 in order to pull all the APIs from all the software that we want to use, so we could tailor it to them. Now, all the technology is actually standard. Everything works off the Crestron UC engine inside, the Flexes that are in the rooms, all of our projectors, everything, that stuff is standardized. The experience is what we made different, right? Because, and that's where we were able to balance that line, because we know that's what the faculty want. They want to know where's comfort. So they don't have to think about the technology. And that's actually one of the great things that we've found as we really deployed this, and the faculty are coming back after the pandemic, is their schedule. They've freaked out because they've heard about this great upgrade we've done. Okay, I'm never going to use it. They schedule a time. By the time our tech shows up to the room, they're like, "Oh no, I already got it figured out. Don't worry."
Worked it out.
Yeah.
Like, okay, then that's achieved what we want it to do.
Yeah.
Sure.
Interesting you use the term lectern. I found that a lot of people in the US, instead of calling it a lectern, they call it a podium. And I'm like, no, a podium is something you stand on, not stand behind. A lectern is something you stand behind. But what I'd like to know, in the past, we found that a lot of universities, especially in Australia, they would have all the AV, all the technology within the room, right? Within the lectern. And their reasoning behind that was, well, if we have a problem, it only affects one room. It's not a centralized system, which obviously there are a lot of efficiencies to be had by centralizing your solutions. But their concern, once again, in the past, that this thought process is changing. But what they used to think is, well, if this room goes down, then it doesn't affect the room next to us or the room upstairs or whatever. So I'm guessing that you guys probably did the same thing. You probably had in-room equipment previously, and then you've gone over to a network AV over IP solution, right? And how is that? How did you mitigate any, sort of points of failure or have redundancy? How'd you build all that in?
Yeah, this was actually a debate that we had, and one of the kind of the neat things is our former design took up 15 rack units. Our current design uses 2.
Wow.
Right. Wow. That is a huge change. Right. And so we purposefully went away from that. Yes, I do hear this from colleagues going, well, if you do your entire thing based on a server, VC4 is running, 500 spaces.
Yes.
Well, when the server goes down, does that mean every one of your classrooms goes down? And I say, yes. But guess what? If the network on campus goes down,
you got bigger problems.
No one's calling me. Right? Like, I'm the last thing anyone's thinking about.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we had to go through that process. So we thought, and I wanted the other way. Imagine if the telephone company or your home internet company had to manage all of their customers' endpoints all from that customer's home. No, they
Yeah.
need to centrally manage it,
Yeah.
right? They need to be able to do things and scale it out and monitor it. So that was the move. The move was take it away from the classroom, only put what you need there. What I need is an encoder and a decoder. It's basically all I need in the space. And move everything else out, which also means if something goes down or I'm losing one of them, I don't actually have to go into the room to fix it. It's somewhere else where we don't bother the class. And
Yes.
because we've brought it into a server-based system and an IP-based system, I usually know there's a problem before anybody else does. I'm not waiting for them to tell me the classroom's not working. We already know, and we've probably already fixed it.
Yeah, 100%. So let's dig into that a little bit more. You've probably answered that question to some degree. Your AV over IP system is sitting on the IT infrastructure, or have you created your own AV IT infrastructure around that? How does that deploy out?
Yeah, we technically have our own AV VLAN.
Yep.
That said, it does run within the same switches core. I mean, everything else. And that was actually, again, another decision that we made because we wanted to link services, right? I wanted to have access control. I wanted to be able to have a true from anywhere to anywhere experience on campus. And we could make every space, flexible if we needed to. And so because of that, we had to work into our Office 365, all these things for scheduling, our classroom scheduling required us to have a sort of mesh. It's a hacked mesh system, let's call it.
And you've got your APIs that you've got to try and feed out to Blackboard and things like that. So
Exactly.
so there's no physical AV layer. It's definitely VLAN through, and then as you say, it becomes the IT's problem when it goes down.
We do have
they can maintain the services under their budget, by the way.
Exactly. And we have a great infrastructure team who has partnered with us this whole time. I mean, I remember when I first brought this to them and told them what I wanted to do and how many network drops I needed. And oh, by the way, my NVX is going to send 1 gig bidirectional down every port at all times. I remember how their jaw kind of dropped and they wanted to slam the door in my face. No, actually, it was the complete other way around. What they wanted to do was say, that sounds cool. How could we make this happen? And that became a great partnership. And if I could give you didn't ask, so I'm going to ask my own question. If I had to give advice to somebody, we'll pretend that you asked me that question.
It was coming. I'll have to scrub it off now.
If I was going to do the key to moving forward is that relationship, understanding that, just because my technology is easier and cheaper, right? Heck, a lot cheaper to just do an encoder and decoders around everywhere. But that cost isn't actually gone. It's just kicked to somebody else's department, right? It's kicked to the infrastructure team. It's kicked to the server team. Those are the people who now are really key to my success. So I need to build those relationships, have the conversations together, and work the plan together. This is where we were happy to have not that we're happy to have a global pandemic, but we got lucky because that gave us time to work through it together without people on campus, without impacting a lot of services. We could actually spend the time to make sure the infrastructure was correct in there and that the flow. I mean, as anyone who works on a college campus knows, good luck going to your IT department and say you'd like them to fully open multicast for you.
Exactly.
And just they're going to look at that one. But we have it. Our server team agreed to it because we made this, a great partnership with one another.
Yeah.
And so you said that you went from 15 RU down to 2 RU. So I'm guessing you got an encoder in the room in the lectern. What else do you have? I mean, you're going to have obviously speakers, microphone, projector, maybe a screen or two, PC in the room. What can you sort of talk us through those systems? So what's left in the room now, and how are they operating? Are you using Dante speakers and Dante microphones? What does it look like?
Yeah.
So we did as part of our upgrade, the one thing we did not touch was projectors, speakers. They were already there. Every classroom already had them. Or displays. We didn't touch any of that. And we didn't need to. We had just done an upgrade a few years ago. So our entire system is this. In the lectern, or, we have this little kind of fancy wall box thing we do. It's got 2 things. It's got the encoder, where it really has 3 things. On one rack unit is the NVX encoder and a small little amp. And on the other rack unit is the Crestron UC engine, or the Crestron Flex UC. That's it. There's the two rack units that are right there. And then that all runs through the network. We stay at layer 3 for all of our network, all of our NVX traffic, so it goes straight back to the IDF. We will then we have everything else. So we all is fully networked. So even we use the Crestron relays for our screens. So those are all network controllable. In the sky is a projector and an NVX decoder at any projector that's mounted to the projector, or a side display if it has multiple displays or anything. We do use the Shure ceiling microphones, the 910s, 710s throughout. If it is a larger auditorium, I think the only exceptions, if it is a larger auditorium, there might be a handheld or a lapel that's also in the rack, just to add that extra.
With the wireless microphones, are you using, I know Shure have some Dante wireless microphones. Are you using anything like that, or is it traditional, like a traditional wireless microphone system, then converting it to Dante?
Yeah, it would depend. So for ones that were already there, we did just use the Avio devices by Audinate. And then some we upgraded because here in the United States, they also sold off a few of the bands, the 600, 700 bands. So by law, we had to change over. So we bought a lot of Dante native, either UX or something like that, Accent. Just for those handhelds. And again, those are the special spaces. The average classroom doesn't need a handheld mic. So you're really talking about your larger auditoriums, lecture spaces. So I think that was a handful, 22 or something. So not a ton.
So I'm interested to know the Shure 910. They're all they're ceiling mounted. The 710s, however they're sort of installed. Acoustics make a big difference in these spaces to how well these microphones perform. What challenges did you come up with or against with acoustics in these spaces, and how did you deal with that?
This is a place where we were pleasantly surprised. So if you look at the audio side, I guess I didn't leave out that we also have a camera in every room. It's either a Hudley camera or it's a PTZ if it's a larger space. But back to the acoustic question. So the acoustic was one of these pleasantly surprised. So we used, and I believe we were the very first enterprise deployment of Shure's IMX Room DSP. So it's a software-based DSP.
Yeah, I saw that. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm actually very excited about that product. I saw it being demonstrated at ISE 2020, right? It seems like so long ago now. But and I thought that was great. I really thought that's a game changer. Once again, if you extend that out to saying installing Dante speakers, Dante microphones, suddenly you don't need an amplifier, and then you run some software, the Shure software in on a PC, then great. I mean, there's hardly any hardware that you need, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of the point. I didn't need to throw a box in there. And so what we did is that we took the Crestron Flex, which is really just a NUC, it's an Intel NUC, right? What it is. And we put IMX Room on it. So we hacked it and we loaded. So it turned the Crestron Flex into a Dante endpoint.
Nice.
And it becomes basically the Dante DSP for the space. So the Shure, 910 or 710s, depending on the size of the space, are already Dante. And our Crestron NVXs, we use the Dante native NVX units. So those also then send the audio for their inputs and outputs. And again, we don't do the Dante speakers yet, only because we didn't touch it. We already had some small, just basically 70-volt system, amplifiers. So we would just get the Avio device to take it out of the Dante and into the speakers. But then because of the way we ran it onto the Crestron Flex, also meant that we could send right into our Zoom meetings straight from Dante Domain Manager right into it, right from the room. It just becomes an output from the IMX Room. And then so that was able to keep everything all completely consistent for our audio. So
that's been stable, Joe. Look, we've seen a little bit of inconsistency with feeding the Dante into Zoom rooms. So has that been a stable sort of deployment for you, that part?
Yeah, I know that there was. This is the video. I'm not the one that had to figure it out. There was a learning curve with it. I think there was just some little hack they had to do, but because the the Crestron Flex became a Dante endpoint once we loaded IMX Room on it. We had the I/O of that device, and I think it was just the way you had to end up setting it ended up making it work fine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's always you go into Zoom in your account online. There's a lot of tick boxes. You keep going triaging down through the trees. There's a lot of tick boxes to turn things on and off, and it's just making sure you've got the right one, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the issues we did come across, which was just working it out, was the echo cancellation. So when you're doing the AAC, because that's built into the DSP to use for your, and Zoom does their own audio and all this stuff, right? So I remember that being an issue, and you just turn one of the two off, and then it fixes the issue.
Yeah, away you go. Yeah, absolutely.
I noticed that when we did our first NVX rollout, probably about 4 years ago at a university in Australia, one thing that really struck me was we did everything was Dante. So all the microphones, all the audio inputs, it was actually a large hall. The projectors were all using NVX. So everything was AV over IP. And you would go to the rack and you would look at it, and, we had a DSP in there. We had a QSC DSP in there. And it was the weirdest thing because we had so much audio going on in this space, and we had one cable plugged in, well, two cables, the power cable and network cable. And you're looking at it and you're going, the contractor hasn't finished his work, right? And it's like, but that's it. It was just so clean and so simple. It was amazing. Rather than in the past, you'd be running cables everywhere, and it's a nightmare. So even from an efficiency point of view, equipment point of view, cabling point of view, points of failure point of view, to me, there's so many advantages by going down this AV over IP path.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, it's interesting because you then notice once you start pulling stuff out, you start realizing how complicated did we make things before? Why did we need all of this? And so now, and again, like you said, the efficiency, but look at other things. How much less power consumption am I now using?
Yeah.
Right? That saves the university. At our scale, if I can cut down the power consumption of every classroom by 75%, which is what we've done, now take that over the course of 500 spaces, and now take that over the course of a year, that's real savings, and that's real environmental impact. Do we bring that? I mean, there's a lot of change that we could do. And then that doesn't even mention the ability to now service that, because like you said, less points of failure. I have an encoder place where I'm putting the audio in, it's going through a switch somewhere, and then it's coming out somewhere where it's going out. Those are my only points of failure, right? Where before, when you had all the analog audio, when something went out, you had to just walk around to every box and just see if it had a green light going on. Okay, no, green, that's good. Oh, red light, there's the problem. Now figure out which side of it's on, right? Yeah. Now you're having to troubleshoot that, and you're doing that in real time. For me, all I have to do is either change an encoder, decoder, or maybe reroute something. It's very simple. Redo the subscription, and it usually fixes itself.
So I read that your installation costs down by about 60%. Is that totally true, or did you sort of push some of that over, as you said before, over to now IT's problem?
Yeah, it is true. There were some other costs on the other side. The good thing is USC had already gone through a major network upgrade a few years ago. Right. So they actually had a ton of open ports in all the blades and stuff, which is really the high cost. And because of COVID, what was interesting is we were able to save people's jobs, because if you think the network infrastructure team, when there's no one on campus, what are they doing? Well, because now I needed to have network polls to all my classes. They got to keep working, right? We gave them something to do. So was there cost in that? Sure, but also it was good in that time that we actually could justify that. But as far as the cost, I will tell you, we had great partners who came to the table when I had this idea, again, even pre-pandemic, and here's what I want to do. My CIO challenged me to rethink about our classrooms. And he said, if you could build something from scratch, what would you do? If I told you you could get rid of All-Star, what would you do? And I did. That's why I brought the plan. I brought him, and he approved it. And with that budget, I then had to go and come through with it. And I got to say, without our great partners, we would not have been able to do it. And also, if you want to save some money, go tell go tell a manufacturer that you're about to buy 1,000, 5,000 of something, trust me, they're going to give you a great price.
Yeah, your best friend. Problem is, they
This
don't
is the
leave you
thing,
alone.
though. We were talking before about, the fragmentation within not just USC, but it sounds like a lot of universities around the US. You guys have got a big stick. Like you just said, you can actually go to these manufacturers and cut a great deal. Imagine if everyone was on board, like all the faculties are on board, and you were able to do that, and you roll in support and all those other things. I mean, you could even get better pricing. That's the thing that we say to our clients: understand the size of your business and the pool that you have, and cut some deals with these organizations. They do want your work, and they will actually, sort of give you very, very good pricing. So did you go out when you had this idea to go to a AV over IP solution? Did you just go straight to Crestron? Did you look at other solutions? Did you talk to anyone else? How did that sort of play out?
Yeah, no, we did a very, very big proof of concept. In fact, we had about 6 or 7 different options. My AV architect's office had smoke coming out practically. He had everything set up, but we tried all of the main technologies across the board, and all of them are good, right? I mean, we had to find the one that worked for us, and had a partner that stepped up that said they believed in my vision and let's do this together. So we tested a little of everything. And just Crestron won, and they honestly, they won pretty hands down with the abilities that they were all, because they've already been ahead. A lot of people are coming into the space. They've been in the space. They already have a vision, and that was really what made a difference. But even like beyond that, you mentioned about, kind of this scale, if everyone got behind together. This is where I think that there's value if you recognize USC alone. I mean, if you look at the SCN, top 50 integrators in the United States, around the globe, right? The biggest ones. And if USC was an integrator, we would be in the 40s on that list.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. We are that big. We are as big as any other integration company in the area, right? Yeah. And so with that, now take the higher ed vertical. What if every higher education institution got together and wielded that stick? And we see from organizations like Avixa who show us that we are worth over $26 billion in annual spend as a vertical alone. Well, that's huge. And that's really the purpose of HETMA, Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance, where we have built that to really capitalize on that power, to advocate for the fact that we are a strong vertical of really, a lot of us are in-house integrators who either came from integration and develop our skills in the same way with a very big pocketbook behind us.
Yeah. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about HETMA, but before we do, I just want to ask you about the support of your system. So obviously you said you had a very large team. I'd be interested to know how big that team is. And also I believe that you rolled out Crestron XIO Cloud from a support, control, monitoring point of view. How did that go, and what benefits did you guys see in rolling that solution out?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the size of my team, I have 12 full-time staff members from basically 5 on the support. 5 on the support side with a manager there. 4 of those support actually do the tech, basically the in-class tech, and as well as I have a marketing and PR person who oversees our digital signage, our branding, and our outward messaging. And then we have an engineering. I have senior and non-senior AV engineers that basically do oversee installation team and tier 3 support. And then I have AV architects and a manager of that area for design and engineering, who will actually do all the proof of concepts, procurement of equipment, and all of the design of the systems.
Just on the design, do you do the design in-house, or do you get outside consultants or someone else to come in and do the designs?
We did the design in-house.
Right.
So we came up with the design house, and then I have a project management team together. And then with that, I actually have over 100 student workers who do the actual class support, oversee our computer labs and all of that. So it is a very large team. Our student workers, the ones that make it work. We are a 24/7 university, so we have consistent support needed, and that's where, say, XIO Cloud, Fusion Cloud came together to really help with this in a couple of ways. One, commissioning of devices. The great thing about it is when we want to set up a class, it's the scalability. I can set up a new classroom in minutes. I can actually have the classroom done before the equipment even shows up, because once I know the MAC address, we put it in, and we've been able to put, allow that. As soon as we take it to a room and plug it into the network, it self-configures, the room's working, right? And that is actually what's made this special. And then utilizing the tools, the dashboards. The great thing that we're able to do is pull APIs from a lot of our other third-party softwares that we use, from our classroom scheduling to our access control, and we've been able to link those together, so we have one central place for which to monitor any space from, and that has really helped with us now being proactive. And that was where I challenged our team to say, when we came up with our SLA of how we wanted to serve our customers, I challenged them and said, I want no more than 5-minute SLA. Every room, 5 minutes. That's it. Well, when some of the rooms are 8 minutes away from our office, how are you going to do that? The best way to do that is not have to go to the room. Can you solve it remotely? Can we do things like, what about a Zoom call right to the room if they have a trouble? Like, my biggest pet peeve, is this, and we all do this: hit a button on a touch panel with the little question mark, the help button. What happens after you hit the help button? It says, call this number. That's what everyone.
That's right.
The worst customer service you could ever give someone. I need help, call this. No. So how about if you hit the button, how about the system calls me? And now I can communicate with that customer. I already have the diagnostic. It's already changed on the dashboard. Because we use HTML, we've now can control the system for them, and we've linking through with our ticketing system, our ServiceNow ticketing system, along with XIO and Fusion. We know all the data points of that space the second that button is hit. That's how you do good customer service.
Yeah.
Following on from that, I also read that your satisfaction ratings or improved satisfaction ratings by over 300%. I'm just curious to really dig into that, how you actually sort of, I'm assuming you just did a before and after type survey, but what sort of questions, how did you get to that point, to be able to manage that?
When I came on, because I was brought into USC in August of 2019 in order to do this, kind of move us into the future. And first thing I did was pull all of our surveys. So we use ServiceNow ticketing system. So every time someone's done, it sends them a little survey. How was the thing? What can you do? So I pulled all that, and out of a 5-star rating, we had a 1.8.
Wow.
1.8. Like, you have to try to be that bad. Like, you literally have to take the customer and say, no, you're an awful person and I don't want to help you. Like, you actually have to try to be that awful. And so, and then we had to rethink, okay, well, what was the problem? And this is what we noticed. A lot of times what people would say was, it was not necessarily that we didn't get it done. They would ask, how was it friendly, blah, blah, did they get it in time? How long did it take? Blah, 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 all those things. The final, they're given awful. Final question was always, did the problem get solved? And they would click yes. So we did solve the problem, right? We solved why the class didn't work, but what we didn't solve was the person. We didn't actually build a relationship with what they were going through. And so what we did, we said, we need to utilize empathy. We need to understand things from what are they going through? No one wants a classroom that doesn't work, right? No one wants to be in the situation. The faculty don't want to be embarrassed in front of their students. So could we turn our thinking around to them, which is why I took most of our faculty who having most of the problems and said, will you help me design our new classrooms? Will you walk me through what you want to do? And so an example that I always use is this. Our touch panels don't say system on and system off. Like they all do that, right? No, ours say start class and end class, right? That's what a faculty member wants. I want to come in there and I want to start class. And now because of that, because we've worked it to fit them, and our support model has been a white glove service with them, thinking about from their point of view and what they're experiencing, that's where our ratings within the first 3 months went to a 4.6, and which is fantastic. And now we're currently at a 4.8, and I don't know who those 0.2 people are. I'm working on that.
You're trying to track them down.
Uh-huh.
A couple of years ago, I did a tour of University of Nevada in Las Vegas, their campus, and they've got a great team there. I've looked at a number of universities around the country, and those guys really stood out. The quality of work, they do everything in-house. So shout out to Frank and Scott at University of Nevada, Las Vegas campus. But what they did, I found interesting, is that they had their own in-house programmer, and they would actually do A/B tests. So in some rooms, they would load the A code on there, and some rooms they'd load the B code, and they would see which ones work best or which ones they had least problems with. Do you guys have your own in-house programming team, and do you do anything like that to work out what is logical and what's not, or what works and what doesn't?
Yeah. First, I will double shout out Frank and his team and Scott out there at UNLV. What they do is just beyond spectacular. The way they're able to really custom tailor to their faculty while standardizing at the same time. And and they're actually one of the places we went to when we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. And we said, okay, who sets the bar? Who does this? Who utilizes Fusion the best? And then they do. And so we went out there, and I'm going to say, Frank, we one up you though. Okay, thanks for the thanks for the help.
Raising the bar.
There you go.
This is getting serious. Come on, Frank. What have you got?
No, they do amazing things there. But in that same vein, we do have in-house. We have programming team of student workers who. The great thing about being a college campus, we got master's level student workers who are computer science, right? So we can bring them in, and they've helped design. We do use some extra integrators for extra help too, some programming, because they know some of the Crestron coding and stuff already and can help us there. So we do have good partners with that. But really, we did something similar, and we wireframed everything. We had our faculty go through it. We don't do the A/B testing only in the sense that we wanted to figure out, what do you guys want to see? How can you do this? I am anti-page flip. I hate page flips with a passion. So we wanted something very simple. We wanted the iPhone feeling. Everyone knows, it's the idea is, why does an iPhone not come with an instruction booklet?
That is I say that to people all the time. I say, when we're talking about user interfaces, I say, what did you do? Have you got an iPhone? And they go, yeah. What did you do with the manual when you got the iPhone? And the look on their face is like, they're going, I didn't get a manual. I'm like, exactly. You didn't get a manual. Why do you need to print out an A4 or a laminated sheet and have it next to the touch panel? That's a failure right there.
Yep, exactly. And that was really the thing, is, can you make it intuitive? And again, it comes from user-centered design, right? And that's what Apple does well. And that's what we really wanted to mimic. And not that we are, at that level, but we still wanted to think, what will people naturally want to do? What's the simplest way to do it? And that's where we used a lot of automation in the programming, right? Can we, have multiple functions happen as people want to do things? And as well, we have full voice control of all of our spaces, gesture control. They're pretty impressive. And that all came because of COVID, because we were given originally it wasn't on the scope, but we were asked, hey, we need to make these rooms touchless. So can we make them touchless? So we have voice control in all of our space, as well as that's where we came in with a lot of automation as well. Just thinking, can we connect our services together?
What are you using? Are you using an existing platform for voice control? I know in the past, Crestron kind of went down that voice control path, or have you just sort of gone with one of the big players, your Googles, your Amazons?
We looked into using those. And in fact, USC, we have a Watson thing on campus, but we didn't. We ended up using Crestron's native, which we actually found worked well. I actually felt in a way, when we were challenged to do voice control, that it was going to be short-lived. I think it was good at the time, right? Everyone was freaking out about COVID. No one's going to ever want to touch something again. Well, guess what? They all touch the screen.
Yeah.
No one asks it to turn on. They all touch the screen.
Yeah.
So we simplified it utilizing what they have. So we do use the motion censoring. So you do the whole wave over it, and it'll bring up a screen that tells you what voice control, what commands you can give it, and of course it just knows as well for the wake words that it has. But we very simplified it. It's basically turning it on, turning it off, screen up and screen down power. I mean, like more volume, less volume. Very, very simple, and exactly what I thought is true. No one uses it. It's great feature to show off when people walk in and have never seen them use it.
A couple of years ago, I was at UBTech, and a guy was doing a presentation there, and I'm not sure if he was at a school or a university, but he actually set up voice control for some of their spaces. And what he said, the hardest thing was actually covering off all the terminology for the same device. I mean, is it a projector? Is it a screen? Is it a mic, whatever it may be? He said different people call these devices different things. And so he found that was the hardest thing. He actually had to write all this code and cater for different words and terminology for that one device. Did you have any issues like that?
Yeah. No, and I remember I was talking to them from Utah State. They kind of went through that same thing, and you realize that's because it was all hard coding, right?
Yeah.
We didn't experience that because we just decided this is very limited. Here it is. Here's your 7 things or 9 things you can ask it to do, and that's it. I love where they're going. Now, I believe in the future. So again, kind of an answer to a question you didn't ask, where we're going in the future, is to more AI. Like, I believe there's an opportunity there. And I think when we can work that, it's like if you ask Siri or Alexa, a question, they already know that it could be 7 or 8 different words and give you the best answer, right? So that's where we're looking to go. I can see us doing that and having these partnerships down the road, because I think there's a lot of other opportunities, especially using AI for accessibility reasons. Right, those who either hard of hearing, eyesight, utilizing app control. Can we? It's another thing we have. You can control the whole room with your app with the QR code and all that stuff. So we do all that. So again, they're kind of bells and whistles that no one's going to use, but I think there's opportunity there, and that's where we will. Because that was a warning. I've talked to the guys there, Jim and all already, and they said the same thing. But we didn't want to kind of fall into coding hell. Right? Because you're always going to forget the one thing that, and so we think that by utilizing third parties that are already doing it, that's going to be a great future there.
Gotcha.
100%. Yeah, I love the reverse thinking that you've sort of applied to all that sort of user interface. I just want to switch gears a little bit if we can. Joe, you've done a lot of work, and I was. Yeah, you'll probably get a notification that I was trawling your LinkedIn profile.
Stalking you.
Yeah. You've done a lot of work in churches, Saddleback, Compass Bible Church. Number one, are you still involved with it? And if you are, talk us through what's happening in the world of churches in the US, and what are they doing with sort of technology to ensure they continue to move forward and sort of spread their message through the pandemic, and will this change the way churches operate sort of forever?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I have worked with the churches in multiple capacities. First, as a volunteer and attendee, starting probably about 10 years ago, and then I did work full time for a short while at Compass Bible Church, where I was the tech director, and which was great because that was our first opportunity. I was actually brought in there to upgrade that as well and move them from the big old, the wire this big around, pull the snake down, and and instead be able to utilize Dante networks and networked AV. So, and that was gosh, that might almost be 10 years ago now. But that was a good opportunity to kind of start moving that direction. And then from there, I did go to Saddleback, which is one of the largest churches here in the States and in the world. And where I oversaw one of the 19 campuses, helped with the launch and all that until it rolled it rolled into another campus. It grew too big, so good problems to have in a church. And then from there with the USC, I no longer work with a church. The pandemic, and then coming to USC, I gave all my stuff there, but I still attend and will help with events and stuff like that, just not in a formal capacity. That said, now to finally answer your question, so you thought you were going to have someone, I'd be too shy, you can't get an answer out of me, and now
Don't have to work hard. Don't have to work hard to get an answer. That's for sure.
You need to have your own podcast. That's what you need.
I know. I should do that one day. One day I'll have to figure out how to kill dead air. And so here's the thing. I think that churches are uniquely positioned to be great test beds, right? There was a lot of churches, obviously pre-pandemic, that really were, and this is what I did my PhD in church production. So I would hope I could consider myself sort of an expert in it. Is that there's a big push toward, whether the acceptability of technology in a church, right? And maybe rightly so, because you could easily take technology and make it a show, which takes away from the message. And it's a message that needs to stay important when you're looking at house of worship. But that said, when you look at the pandemic, a lot of churches were starting to live stream. At Saddleback, we were one of the very first, really in existence to, they had a website back in 1991 and started getting messages out and posted. I mean, that was almost unthinkable back then. We were all still getting our first email address back then, right? Yeah. And so what we saw at Saddleback, for example, is we get 30,000 people weekly show up, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that was pre-pandemic in person. But after when we all had to go online, we were getting over 1 million downloads a week.
Wow.
Okay. Now, what does that say about getting the message of the church out, right? Mm-hmm. That shows there's a huge possibility that we reached people who would never have had even thought to attend, right? Or look up the message. And as people are hurt and suffering at home, to be able to turn on that or go online and see that. And I'm hoping that churches don't go back. I hope that even the very smallest church that may only have 30 or 40 members who already invested, even in some miniature way, a smaller, a Blackmagic streamer, or even use an iPhone, doing something to stream. They keep that going because there's huge opportunities, and that's a way to lead the world. I really think that a church could lead the world in this way, because in like standard installations like me, that's the biggest difference. I mean, I'm doing some creative things that can bring more services in, but it's still commercial integration. It's still, a box that's a classroom that's a talking head. But there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to take our new world of UC and the traditional house of worship and move those forward for sure. And I think that's the direction it's going.
But there's still a lot of risk to the church at that point, though, isn't there? I mean, the church is, and I'm not getting into theology or anything like that, but the church is definitely about fellowship and getting people there. So, isn't that a big risk that they just won't be there and they'll just, I don't feel like going to church on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. I'm just going to sit here in my PJs and I attended virtually, so that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm sure the church world is having that argument, right? Because that's why probably a lot of them didn't want to stream before the pandemic, and it's like, but then necessity created it, right? Even the ones that were fighting it before had no other choice. It was that or shut down, right? Yeah. I believe that we should utilize streaming and these technologies not as a way for, but a way with, right? It's supplement to, being allowed that, even if you're traveling now, you can still watch your service, or you could watch it later, or you could take part in a small group that, but yes, fellowship and in person is a key part of the church coming together. Like, it is the identity of the church as we say, it's not, a church isn't a building, but a people, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then that, therefore I think it's a combination of where you can utilize that. And I hope that it is something that goes with, because there's a lot of great things that can come from it, and you can reach other people or use it for a message to get people in, right? It's a big commercial, right?
It just goes to prove that the technology is the enabler of all these things, whether it's house of worship, whether it's corporate, whether it's teaching and learning, the technology, like you said, it shouldn't be about the technology, but the technology enables these things to happen, and it brings more people together. Like you said, I mean, having 1 million people coming together, you know, up from 30,000 a week is amazing. Like you said, you're getting the word out there. So I think it's great. Before we let you go, Joe, I just want to ask you or talk about HETMA. You're the chair of HETMA, and for our Australian audience who probably doesn't know what HETMA does, to me it seems a bit like and looks and feels like a lot like AETM in Australia. And I'm sure you guys have probably had conversations, HETMA and AETM, about, and there's a lot of synergies there. So can you tell us what your role is at HETMA and what HETMA does in the US, and how does it help universities, and do the universities all come together and work as one and share their problems and experiences? Like, what's that dynamic like here in the US?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a similar parallel to say it. And there are some great organizations, LTSMG and SCOMS in the UK, and then you have ATIM in Australia, then you have CCUMC and the Tech Managers Council here in the United States. And we kind of fit a different mold. And this was one of the things that was important, is it wasn't so much as what are these other organizations not doing, right? But it was more of what do we need, right? They work great. And I'm really glad to partner with all of these. Like, so for example, our CCUMC here in the United States, I sit on the professional development committee for it too. But what we thought was those are ways to develop skills and community within a specific vertical. HETMA's role is to advocate for the vertical as an official organization within without the greater AV industry. For example, some things that we want to do is be able to have a say in what manufacturers are putting out, not just be a group of people who are going to get sold to, but we want to actually tell them, this is what we need. This is how we need it. This is the price point we want. These are other ways to advocate for, as we had already talked earlier, about the large amount of global spend that the vertical utilizes. And what are those needs that we need? Can we build relationships among one another, more direct relationships with our manufacturers and our integrators, so that we all get that same kind of privilege across the board? And, you know, this was founded by myself and BC, who's my counterpart at Vanderbilt University. And, you know, we recognize that, you know, at USC, I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm at a very wealthy school, and I'm a well-known school. So it's very easy for me to get things, right? I can get a vendor to show up to me. I can get test gear. I get great pricing. But what about the small schools in the middle of nowhere, right? No, they're never going to get a vendor show up to them. But they still have 200 rooms, right? Every community college still has a ton of classrooms. They still have to get that. Half the time we talk to our professionals, they don't even know there's educational pricing, which means that the local integrator, the one they might have, is charging them full retail. And probably, guarantee you that integrator is buying at the educational price to pocket that extra amount. I guarantee you they're not paying the retail, right? And so that's where we want to be a resource, you know. And one of the things we do is support all other organizations. It's not just about like kind of taking that, but saying we want to be an advocate for a vertical within the entire global AV industry.
And are those manufacturers actually listening? Like you said, you wanted to have a voice, and by coming together as one, I mean, you have a very, very strong voice there for a very particular vertical. Are you finding that some manufacturers are listening more than others?
I will say that our email and phones are blowing off the hook. I will say that we've had many manufacturers come to us and say, this is fantastic. Because think of it this way. How much do you think they spend just to get user feedback and create focus groups? And we're over here going, use us. Partner with us, come in here, talk to us, let us talk to you. You know how valuable that is? And we've had these conversations with manufacturers say, which would you prefer? Come out with a device, because how many years does it take for research and development, engineering, put something out, market it, get it out to the right? And you do that, and then it's a flop and no one wants it. Or come to us, we will tell you what we want. You manufacture it. We'll even put our stamp of approval on it. And now you're selling hundreds of it because you designed something that the vertical wants and needs, you know? And a good example of that is we actually me personally was with a projector manufacturer who came in and said to me, look at all these things it does. You can use your app and you can do this and they can change this and blah, 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 and this. And I said, that's kind of cool, but all I'm going to do is turn it on and turn it off. Can you take all the other bells and whistles off? I don't even need a fancy lens. Guess what? Just tell me how far away from the screen to put it. Yeah. Okay. I can run the power wherever I want on the ceiling. And literally, that's all I needed to do. And the funny thing is, this manufacturer came out and they created an entire line, basically ripping all the bells and whistles out, leaving some that have to be there, and which saved on the price point because now we didn't need all that. And they're one of their largest models that's going off the shelf now because as a focus group, we were able to give this input. And I think that's really the key and where there's huge opportunities. And then integrators win because now there's already a brand they don't even have to try to sell. There's a group of vertical going, this is what we want. And you've got your pricing already built into that. It becomes a win-win all the way through.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I recently signed up as a member. So I'm looking forward to sort of having more dialogue and to see where it all goes because, we would be very keen to start working with people like yourself and Frank and other universities around the country because by what we saw in Australia, you would have one university raise the bar and then everyone looks at them and then they raise the bar and they raise the bar and it becomes very competitive, which is great, because when I say great, it's great for the students because they're getting, like you said before, they're getting a better experience out of it by continually raising that bar. Yep. So just one more thing. I know we've covered a lot of ground today. One more thing before we go. and Mark did warn you I'd ask a lot of questions. But, you do have we joked before about having your own podcast, but you do have your own podcast, the Education AV podcast, I believe. Is that, the Higher Ed AV podcast? Higher
Ed AV, yeah. So it is a podcast and a web portal. So at higheredav.com, you go and we have great content creators all from within the higher ed vertical who do different monthly columns, one from for example, IT side, an integrator side, accessibility. I write a business of AV column that comes out the first of every month. And then I also have the podcast that goes along with it. And there's also other podcasts on the platform as well, like the AV Life and AV Super Friends. But I have the Higher Ed AV podcast where I interview tech managers from around the country, around the globe. I've covered Australia and UK, so we're global. Interview, and really we just it's a very organic show, just like yours here, where it's us just sitting, talking shop, and trying not to kill too much air in a year in an hour.
135 episodes. It must be going all right, Joe.
It's going. I can't believe that anyone would ever listen. Well, I actually don't know people listen. I just record. No, I'm
how you feel.
Completely blessed with the show, and just the way it's been able to connect a vertical has been fantastic, and just be able to be a resource for people who need it, and that's and people that are kind of dear to my heart. So.
Yeah, you were quoted, Joe, as saying the answer is always yes. Is that the only reason why you said yes to join our show today?
The answer is always yes. That is, that gets me in a lot of trouble though. Just don't play drinking games with me because I have to answer yes. I definitely believe that there's opportunities, and when I've been blessed to be given a platform to be able to speak for a vertical and the AV industry as a whole, and I think that this is always, as we get to that point in our careers where we're starting to look more toward the end of it than we see the beginning of it, this is where I hope to use all my available platforms and ability to just open these doors for others. So. I always say yes.
Nice. So speaking of platforms, Joe, if people want to know a little more about you, where can they find you and all your stuff?
Yeah. All right. Obviously I have a website, josiahway.com. But anyway, find me on all the socials. At Josiah Way is my handle. And you can connect to Higher Ed AV, which is at Higher Ed AV and HEPMA_org, and everything else there. But if you just find me at Josiah Way, and you can find everything else through that.
Yeah, nice one. Joe Way, thank you so much for coming on the show. Continue to watch and keep connected. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.